The Wedding Call, a selection from The Singing Tree by Kate Seredy. This great book called The Singing Tree is the sequel to another favorite of ours called The Good Master. This is a story of Hungary and Hungarian traditions around the time of World War I and thereafter. This is simply a very beautiful excerpt of a remarkable traditions surrounding how they do a wedding. And so I simply present this as a beautiful sketch of beautiful wedding traditions. All you need to know, a couple of characters involved. The Nagy, N-A-G-Y, the Nagy family is the central family here. Parents, Martin and his wife. The son, a teenager, probably mid-teens or so, is named Yancey. He has a cousin named Kate. Kate's father is Sandor, is Martin Nagy's brother. They live together at this time in the house, and this is also something of a story of kind of the coming of age of Yancey. One thing to note, Kate had basically grown up in the city, so she does not know the traditions that are preserved in the countryside. And so this is a kind of new discovery to Kate, but not to her father or her uncle Martin and his wife and their son Yancey, whose country home this is. Chapter 4, The Wedding. Sunday began like any other day on the ranch. The family was up with the first crow of the roosters, and when the sun pushed its round red face over the horizon, they were almost through with the morning meal. Father, Yancey, and Uncle Sandor were talking placidly about some fences and new buildings. Mother, waiting for them to rise from the table, sat stitching, equally placidly, on a piece of embroidery. Kate, who had rushed through her morning chores and gulped down her breakfast, began to squirm in her chair. Nobody paid any attention to her. She twisted and fidgeted, sat forward and pushed back again, made little noises in her throat as if she had a cold, until Mother looked up from her embroidery. Seeing the anxious expression on Kate's face, she gave a little nod and said soundlessly, "You may go." Kate shook her head impatiently. "No, Auntie, no." "What is it then?" "The wedding. Aren't we going to get dressed for the wedding?" whispered Kate. "I should say not," said Mother. "Auntie, aren't we going?" This was a wail loud enough to make the men look up and take notice. "Of course we are going, but we can't get dressed until we have been called. It would not be seemly," explained Mother calmly. "Called? You mean invited? But we have been invited. Everybody has been invited. Why, Auntie, the dresses and food we got ready," stammered Kate. Still, Mother didn't move. "We haven't been called yet," was all she said. "Daddy," Kate appealed to her father, "I just don't understand." "You will in a little while," he smiled. "You will see an ancient ceremony, the wedding call. The words and formalities in that ceremony are almost as old as the Magyar race. Every word the callers will say, every word your uncle will say, has been said in just that way at every Hungarian wedding for hundreds of years. It's a tradition we would not dare change." "They should be here any minute now," said Yancey. "Yes, and we had better get to work. It won't do at all to let them find us waiting," said Father, rising from the table. To Kate's consternation, everybody got very busy, chopping wood, although there was a huge pile already chopped, brushing horses, although they shone like satin anyway, carrying water to the kitchen, although the pails were full with the daily supply. Mother insisted that Kate help her with the dishes, a task she usually didn't want any help with. After the last dish had been polished, she said, "Open the windows in the clean room, Kate, and dust the chairs." The clean room was very seldom opened. It was a kind of parlor reserved for the most festive occasions, and kept dark most of the time, but always scrupulously clean. Any visitor who was led into the clean room was an honored guest indeed. Kate's puzzled question, "Why, Auntie, who in the world is coming?" went unanswered because Mother cried, "Hurry, here they come." Opening the windows and shutters of the clean room, Kate saw 2 wagons drive into the yard. And what wagons! They had been freshly painted, and each was pulled by 4 white horses. Wagons and horses were all but covered with wreaths of flowers and ribbons. There were flowers tied to the whips of the drivers, to the headbands of the horses, to the whiffle trees and the wheels. Men, young and old, came piling off, dressed in the gayest of their always gay and colorful holiday costumes. The wide sleeves of their shirts and their pleated full trousers were dazzlingly white. Their vests were a colorful riot of applique work and embroidery. Their boots were so glossy that an impish thought came into Kate's head, and she giggled. A fly would break its neck on them. And the hats, high and black, they were wound around and around with many colored ribbons, encircled with flowers. Father was walking toward them, followed by his brother and Yancy. The men stood in an orderly line, and one of them, evidently their leader, because he carried a flower-laden staff, stepped forward. "Kate," called Mother from the doorway, "come quickly. The call is beginning." She and Kate hurried out just when Father began to speak. "May the Lord give a good day to all you men. What happy event has brought you such a long way to our modest home?" "A very good day to you, our host," spoke the leader. "It is a great honor for us to be received in your good home." Father stepped aside, indicating the door with an outstretched arm. "Please enter and accept our hospitality." "We thank you," said the leader. Slowly they walked in, through the kitchen, into the clean room, followed by the family. There the men stood in a line again. The leader stepped forward and knocked with his staff on the floor. "Our kind host," he began, "we have come to ask for your help and the help of all your dear family." "We are at your service," said Father seriously. "We are," repeated Mother, Yancy, and Kate's father. Kate, to whom all this was like a play, piped up a moment later. "Me too." "Thank you." The leader bowed his head, then went on. "There was a little white dove back home where we came from. A little white dove, pure and gentle. She has been kept in a cage all her life, but this spring the door of her cage has been opened. She has flown off to the woods and there heard the call of her mate." "That is as it should be," Father said. "That is as it should be," nodded the leader. "Now, the little white dove and her mate are ready to build their nest. We, who have known her all her life and know she is deserving, have come to ask you, dear host, to help feather her nest." "We will," said Father. The leader lifted his staff high and then knocked with it on the floor 3 times. "And so we call you to the wedding of the maid Marie Vidor and the lad Peter Hody, to the feast and the rejoicing at the house of Janos Vidor, and to the Lead Me Home procession tonight." He paused for a moment, then added, "You have been called." "We have been called," said Father, "and we shall come gladly." With Father's last words, the ceremony was over. The men relaxed, began to move around and talk about everyday things. Father and Mother brought in bread and wine and invited the callers to sit down. This, however, was politely declined. They each took a bite of bread and a sip of wine, then shook hands with everybody and left. The moment the wagons turned down the lane, Mother closed the windows and shutters of the clean room. "Now hurry, all of you, and get dressed," she cried. "I don't want to be late for the wedding. Hurry." "Auntie," mumbled Kate, struggling into her petticoats, "why couldn't we have dressed before? We knew we were going." "It would have seemed forward to take it for granted. Oh, don't ask me questions now, Kate. Help me lace this bodice," Mother gasped. "Good gracious, how these materials shrink." Kate pulled at the laces with all her might. There, you look fine, Auntie, just as if you had been poured into it, and not a wrinkle. I feel like a stuffed goose, sighed Mother, but that can't be helped. Let me see you now. Bonnet, blouse, bodice, petticoat, skirt, apron, boots. Yes, you'll do. Get the prayer books and the lace kerchiefs. Don't wrinkle them now. Here we go. How these doors shrink, giggled Kate when Mother, in her innumerable petticoats, pleated skirt, and apron, had to be pushed and coaxed through the narrow door. Suddenly Mother let out a little shriek and stood still. What is it, Auntie? Cried Kate, trying to peek around the considerable girth of her aunt. Oh, my holy saints, Yancey! They both gaped at the strangely tall and broad-shouldered young man who a little while ago was just plain Yancey. He stood between his father and uncle, almost as tall as they were. Perhaps he was standing on tiptoe, but he had good reasons for it. For the first time in his life he was dressed as only the big ranchers are dressed on the plains, exactly like Father. Tight-fitting blue coat with braids on, slim blue riding breeches, patent leather boots, even a soft silk tie. Mother, meet the young master, Yancey, in case you don't know him, said Father, putting his arm around Yancey's shoulder. I was rather surprised myself, he added with a smile. Kate found her voice first. Why, Yancey, it's perfectly beautiful, she cried, running around him in circles. Aw, go on. A man can't be beautiful, grumbled Yancey, not at all displeased. You aren't so bad yourself at that. But his eyes were on Mother, who still hadn't spoken. Now she smiled and said, It's fine, Yancey, fine. Only you look so much the way your father used to when I first met him. It gave me quite a turn. Do I? Cried Yancey, pulling himself still straighter if possible. Well then, that's all right. Let's go. The men eased Mother and Kate into the wagon carefully, as if they were baskets of eggs. Uncle Sandor sat between them, all but covered with the overflowing ruffles, ribbons, and laces. Wants to drive, son? Asked Father. No, sir, I'm riding Barsony, declared Yancey. You are? Who said so? Frowned Father. I am saying so. If we are going to stay for the lead me home, we won't be back until late. Somebody has got to milk the cows because... A cow isn't interested in excuses. All a cow wants is to be milked, chanted the whole family, laughing at Father's surprised face. And that is my job, declared Yancey sturdily. I'll ride home at sundown and be back for the lead me home. You go on. I'll catch up with you, he cried, running toward the stable. And that, dear brother, laughed Uncle Sandor, sounds like an order from the boss. Father pulled his hat over his eyes with an almost boyish gesture. That was an order, or I don't know the voice of authority. What a boy. He swung himself into the seat. Come up here, Sandor. You look like a June bug drowned in whipped cream back there. Besides, he whispered to his brother when the wagon was on its way, it would be kind of lonesome up here alone. Yancey, riding Barsony, caught up with them at the end of the lane. Once on the main road, they became part of the long line of wagons, carriages, and riders, all headed for the village. People were singing, shouting to one another and to the nagis. One wagon carried a whole gypsy band playing lively tunes. The sun was laughing down at the plains from a cloudless blue sky, and the plains seemed to be laughing back in a burst of brilliant color and gay song. By the time Father found a place for the wagon and horses, the small church was packed to overflowing. So, to Mother's disappointment, they had to stand on the steps. Behind them, the crowd grew and grew until people completely filled the square. From the sound of murmuring voices broken by moments of stillness and the ringing of the acolytes' bells inside the church, they could follow the service. They all joined in the singing of hymns, and when the organ rang out triumphantly, pronouncing the end of the ceremony, the singing and shouting mingled with the booming bells in the steeple, must have reached the gates of heaven and made the angels smile. There was a stir in the wide doorway of the church. The crowd parted, and the bridal procession began to move slowly down the steps. The bride, Marie Vidor, dressed in foaming, glistening white, seemed to float on the crest of a wave of color. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, and as soon as she reached the lowest step, was whisked off back to her father's house. The girls and women scattered into groups, each group taking up its post in a different house along the main street. The men and boys stayed with Peter and began the traditional game, the seeking. Led by the callers and followed by the softly playing gypsies, they went from house to house. At every door they stopped, and Peter knocked. "Good people in this house, I have lost my white dove. My white dove has flown away. Help me find her, good people." The door was opened, and the women, who had arrived there only a short while before, came out. "We have not seen your white dove, but help you we will." This was repeated over and over again, and the procession grew. The whole village was behind Peter when finally they reached the Vidor farm. Here Peter repeated his call, and Marie's mother opened the door. "I have seen your white dove, and find her you will," she said. A great shouting and cheering broke out at these words, and the gypsies crashed into a wild tune. The crowd formed a large half-circle around the door. Janos Vidor appeared, leading a bent old woman by the hand. "May this be the white dove you are seeking?" Peter walked around the old woman solemnly. Then he stepped back and shook his head. "This one is too old to be my white dove." Now Marie's mother came, leading a small girl. "May this be the white dove you are seeking?" Again Peter shook his head. "This one is too young to be my white dove." One by one they let out tall girls, short girls, fat girls, thin girls, but to each one Peter objected, to the immense amusement of the crowd. The game went on, and the hilarity grew. Then suddenly the bride appeared in the doorway, and everybody shouted, "May this be the white dove you are seeking?" Peter threw his hat into the air and cried, "This is my white dove I have been seeking." The crowd cheered, the band swung into Zardos, and Peter swept Marie into the dance. This was the sign for the real festivities to begin. Young and old danced, faster and faster. The bride flew from hand to hand, around and around, until she had danced with every man. Then she was led back to Peter, who had danced with every girl and woman. Together, they led the cheering guests back of the house to the garden and orchard, where long, sturdy tables had been piled high with food and drinks. The food visible on the tables was only a beginning. More came every minute, brought from the wagons of the guests and the neighbors' kitchens. There were roast pigs and lambs, chickens, geese, and ducks by the dozens, mountains of sausages, hams, pastries, cakes, baskets of bread, buns, and rolls. And so the description goes on in this chapter called The Wedding, in the book called The Singing Tree by Kate Seredy.